Do you want your planner to make the wedding beautiful, Charlotte, or just invisible? The question came from the florist in a whisper, but it was too late. Charlotte Kensington had already spotted Naomi Carter standing beside the ballroom mock-up with a leather binder in her hands and a headset clipped behind one ear. The bride's smile sharpened instantly. Invisible would be ideal, Charlotte said, loud enough for every bridesmaid, vendor, and family member within 20 feet to hear. Especially if she keeps arranging my centerpieces like we're decorating for a budget fundraiser. The room went still in that subtle, expensive way only wealthy rooms could, where no one gasped, no one protested, but everyone heard it. Naomi stood at the center of the grand Hartford ballroom beneath 3 crystal chandeliers worth more than her first apartment, the scent of white roses and candle wax thick in the air, and felt every eye flick toward her before darting away again. Her fingers tightened once around the clipboard, then loosened. I can adjust the floral spacing if you'd prefer more density, she said evenly. Charlotte gave a light laugh and walked toward the mock reception table, her silk heels tapping against polished marble. No, what I'd prefer is someone who understands old money elegance. She picked up the seating chart Naomi had spent 6 hours finalizing, scanned it with exaggerated disappointment, then tore the top page free from the binder. Rip. The sound cut through the ballroom like paper against bone. This looks cheap, Charlotte said, letting the page fall to the floor. Maybe if my mother hadn't insisted on hiring a planner for diversity optics, we wouldn't be here. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. One bridesmaid stared down into her champagne flute. Another pretended to fix her phone. No one spoke. Naomi bent slowly, picked the torn page off the floor, and smoothed the crease with careful fingers. Her face remained calm, but her pulse hammered so hard in her throat she could hear it. I'll revise it, she said. Charlotte tilted her head, dissatisfied by the lack of reaction. You know, Ethan said this venue needed warmth. I didn't realize he meant urban charm. A few awkward laughs escaped the room, small, embarrassed, cowardly things. And across the ballroom, Ethan Whitmore finally looked up. He had been standing near the stage with his groomsmen, halfway through a conversation with the band leader, but now his gaze locked on Naomi. She felt it before she saw it. Heavy, fixed, watching, tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal-fitting suit. Ethan looked every bit the polished heir his family had raised him to be. Perfect posture, perfect jawline, perfect silence. And that silence stung more than Charlotte's words. Because he had heard. He had seen. And he said nothing. Naomi lowered her eyes, turned back to the table, and began gathering the torn pages as if humiliation were just another mess to clean. Make sure the revised one is on my desk by tonight, Charlotte added, already walking away. And less banquet hall. More Fifth Avenue. Her entourage followed, perfume and laughter trailing behind them. The ballroom slowly resumed its motion. Conversations restarted. Glasses clinked. Vendors looked anywhere but at Naomi. She crouched beside the reception mock-up, stacking papers with hands so steady no one would guess they were trembling. Then a shadow fell across the floor. She looked up. Ethan Whitmore stood there, close enough now that she could smell cedar cologne beneath the sharp scent of pressed linen. His mouth parted slightly, like he meant to say something. An apology, maybe. A defense too late. But Naomi rose before he could. She handed him the corrected binder without a word, her expression cool, unreadable. Then she looked directly into his eyes, clear, proud, unshaken in every way that mattered, and said softly, "If you wanted to help, Mr. Whitmore, you would have spoken before she tore it." The words hit him harder than if she'd shouted them. She turned and walked away beneath the chandeliers, headset wire brushing her neck, heels clicking against marble in measured rhythm. Behind her, Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, staring after the woman everyone in the room had treated like staff, while something unfamiliar and deeply inconvenient began tightening in his chest. And for the first time since his engagement began, the groom looked at someone other than the bride and couldn't seem to look away. Naomi did not let herself shake until the ballroom doors swung closed behind her. The service corridor beyond them was narrow and cold, lined with metal carts, stacked linen bins, and the faint smell of bleach rising from freshly mopped tile. She exhaled once, hard, bracing both hands against the stainless steel prep table beside her until the sting in her chest dulled enough to breathe through. Then she straightened, tucked the torn seating chart beneath her binder, and went back to work. Because humiliation did not stop timelines. Because floral deliveries still had to be rerouted. Because the violin quartet still needed their revised cue list. Because if Naomi Carter had learned anything building her business from one folding table and borrowed business cards, it was this. Nobody cared how embarrassed you felt if the candles were crooked. 2 hours later, the ballroom gleamed again. Gold charger plates reflected chandelier light in perfect circles. The floral arch stood reconstructed at the altar with ivory roses cascading exactly 16 inches down each side. Every napkin fold matched. Every chair aligned. Every detail immaculate. Naomi stood alone at the back of the room, checking the symmetry of the sweetheart table when she heard footsteps behind her. Slow. Deliberate. Not vendor footsteps. Too measured. She did not turn immediately. You missed one candle, Ethan said quietly. Naomi glanced over her shoulder. He stood near the entrance with both hands in his pockets. Jacket slung over one shoulder now. Tie loosened slightly, as if the day had worn on him harder than expected. She followed his gaze to the far left taper candle on the sweetheart table. It leaned half an inch off center. She walked over, adjusted it without a word, and stepped back. Thank you, she said flatly. Silence stretched between them. The ballroom felt larger at night. Emptier. More honest somehow, without the crowd to perform for. Ethan took a few slow steps forward, the polished floor soft beneath expensive shoes. About earlier, he began. Naomi closed her binder. Do not. He stopped. I was going to apologize. She gave a small humorless smile. Were you? The words landed gently, but they cut. Ethan swallowed. Charlotte was out of line. Naomi turned fully now, meeting his eyes beneath the warm chandelier glow. And you stood there. It was not that simple. It usually is. Her voice remained calm, but something in it had gone colder than anger. Someone humiliates another person in front of you. You either stop it or you help it happen. Ethan looked down briefly, jaw tightening. You think I do not know that? I think, Naomi said, gathering her papers, that men like you spend a lot of time pretending silence is neutrality. The words hung between them, like smoke. For a moment, Ethan had no answer. He only watched her, really watched her, not the planner with the headset and clipboard, not the woman gliding through schedules and emergencies with practiced grace, but the person beneath it. Her shoulders were squared even now, her chin high, her dignity intact despite everything thrown at it. And that unsettled him more than anger would have. Why did you stay? He asked suddenly. Naomi paused. What? Most people would have walked out after what she said. Naomi let out a quiet breath through her nose. Because your wedding still has 180 guests arriving Saturday. Because the florist has to be paid. Because the venue coordinator panics if anyone breathes wrong. Because my staff depends on me. Pick one. That is not the real answer. She looked at him then, and for the first time the steel in her softened into something older. Wearier. No, she said. The real answer is because people like your fiancé spend their whole lives expecting women like me to break first. Ethan said nothing. Naomi stepped closer, not flirtatious, not hesitant, just close enough that he could hear the steadiness in her breath. I do not give people like that the satisfaction. Then she walked past him, the scent of vanilla and rose water lingering faintly in the air after she passed. Ethan remained motionless in the center of the empty ballroom, staring at the door she had disappeared through. Around him, the wedding she had built shimmered in candlelight and crystal. Perfect. Elegant. Controlled. But for the first time since the engagement began, all he could think about was the woman who had stood in the middle of his polished world, been treated like less than human, and somehow carried herself like the only person in the room who knew her worth. That night, Ethan Whitmore lay awake in a penthouse that overlooked half of Manhattan and could not stop hearing the sentence she had said in the ballroom. Someone humiliates another person in front of you. You either stop it or you help it happen. The words replayed in his head long after the city lights blurred against the glass and Charlotte drifted asleep beside him beneath imported linen sheets. He stared at the ceiling, one arm behind his head, jaw tight. He had spent 34 years being praised for being composed, strategic, diplomatic. He had been taught since childhood that powerful men did not make scenes, that they managed discomfort quietly, that maintaining order mattered more than indulging emotion. But now, in the dark, that training felt less like discipline and more like cowardice dressed in a tailored suit. Morning came gray and wet, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Whitmore estate where the rehearsal brunch was set to begin in less than 3 hours. Ethan arrived at the venue early under the excuse of checking with the caterer, though even he knew that was not why he came. He found Naomi in the courtyard behind the ballroom, kneeling beside a delivery crate of ivory peonies, rain mist clinging to the shoulders of her black trench coat, while she inspected each stem with gloved hands. Her hair was pulled back into a low knot now, small gold hoops catching the pale morning light whenever she moved. She looked up only briefly when his shoes clicked against the stone path. "If you are here to inspect flowers, I promise they meet billionaire standards," she said dryly. Ethan almost smiled. "I am here because I owe you an apology." Naomi returned her attention to the flowers. "You said that already." "No," he replied, stepping closer. "Yesterday, I tried to apologize because I felt guilty. Today I am apologizing because you were right." That made her pause. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Rain dotted the fabric of her sleeves. "About what?" "About silence." His voice was quieter than usual, less polished, more honest. "I told myself I was keeping peace, that confronting Charlotte in front of everyone would make things worse. But the truth is, I did not want the discomfort, and that made me complicit." Naomi studied him carefully, searching for performance, for ego, for the reflexive self-protection rich men often mistook for sincerity. She found none. Most men would rather defend their image than admit that. Most men are cowards in expensive watches. A short breath escaped her, almost a laugh before she caught it. Ethan noticed. It felt absurd how much that nearly smile affected him. "Why are you marrying her?" Naomi asked suddenly. The question landed harder than he expected. Ethan looked out toward the rain-dark garden, where workers rushed beneath umbrellas adjusting white aisle runners against the wind. "Because she fits," he said after a long pause. "Fits? What? My life. My family. The expectations. The board. The photos people imagine when they hear the name Whitmore." Naomi crossed her arms. "That is not marriage. That is branding." He let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. "You always this direct?" "Only when someone asks questions they do not really want answered." Their eyes met then, and something shifted, something quieter and more dangerous than flirtation. Not attraction built on surface or novelty, but the strange intimacy of being seen more clearly than one expected. A voice suddenly cut across the courtyard. "There you are, Charlotte." Sharp, bright, immaculate in cream athleisure and diamond studs, standing beneath a black umbrella held by one of her bridesmaids. Her gaze moved from Ethan to Naomi and cooled several degrees. "I have been looking everywhere for you," she said to Ethan, then to Naomi, with a glance at the flowers. "Please tell me these are not the final peonies." They looked droopy. Naomi looked at the stems. They were flawless. "They opened naturally because of the humidity," she said professionally. "They will photograph beautifully." Charlotte wrinkled her nose. "Fix it." Then she looped her arm through Ethan's and pulled him away without another word. Ethan glanced back once over his shoulder. Naomi had already knelt beside the flowers again, calm as ever, adjusting petals with gentle hands as rain beaded along her coat. But now when he looked at Charlotte beside him, at her polished smile, her perfect posture, the woman he had once believed was the obvious choice, he felt something unfamiliar settle heavily in his chest. For the first time, the life in front of him no longer looked impressive. It looked arranged, and for reasons he could no longer ignore. The only thing in his world that still felt real was the woman standing in the rain with dirt on her gloves and dignity no amount of money could buy. By late afternoon, the rehearsal brunch had collapsed into the kind of chaos only wealthy families could produce with enough entitlement and champagne. A bridesmaid had changed her dress measurements at the last minute. Charlotte's mother hated the calligraphy on the escort cards. One of the groomsmen insisted the custom whiskey bar was placed 3 feet too far left because it threw off the room. Naomi handled each crisis with the same measured calm she brought to everything, headset pressed to one ear, binder tucked against her ribs, issuing instructions in a low, steady voice while vendors scrambled around her like orbiting planets. Ethan found himself watching her from across the ballroom more than he listened to anyone speaking directly to him. It was not simply that she was beautiful, though she was. It was the way she moved through pressure without becoming cruel. The way she corrected problems without humiliating the people who caused them. The way she absorbed stress and somehow returned order instead of panic. He had spent his whole life around people who mistook authority for volume. Naomi never raised hers once. Earth to Groom. His best man, Connor, nudged his shoulder. Ethan blinked. What? Connor followed his gaze toward Naomi, then smirked slowly. You have been staring at the planner for 10 straight minutes. Ethan straightened immediately. I have not. You have. Enough that if Charlotte notices, I am denying knowing you. Ethan took a sip of bourbon he no longer wanted. She is competent. I appreciate competence. Connor laughed under his breath. Sure. Before Ethan could answer, a crash rang out near the cake display. Gasps followed. Everyone turned. One of the junior servers stood frozen beside the 6-tier wedding cake, face pale with horror as the top decorative layer leaned dangerously to one side. The girl could not have been older than 19. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the tray she was holding. Charlotte spun around and shrieked. Are you kidding me? Do you realize that cake cost more than your car? The room tightened. The server's eyes filled instantly. I am so sorry, ma'am. I did not mean. Then what exactly do they pay you for? Charlotte snapped, stepping toward her. Naomi was moving before anyone else. She reached the display in seconds, examining the structure with one glance. Nobody touch it, she ordered calmly. Her voice cut through the panic like a blade through silk. Get me 2 offset spatulas, floral wire, and the emergency icing kit. Now. Vendors sprang into motion. Naomi turned to the trembling server, lowering her voice. Look at me. The girl did, barely holding herself together. It is fixable. Breathe. But you did not ruin anything, Naomi said firmly. Take a breath and hand me the tray. The girl obeyed. Naomi steadied the collapsing layer with one hand while carefully removing decorative flowers with the other, directing staff with surgical precision. Within minutes, she had rebalanced the support rods, reset the layer, patched the icing seam, and replaced the florals so seamlessly that half the room could not tell anything had happened. A murmur spread through the guests. Even the pastry chef stared in disbelief. Charlotte folded her arms, annoyed that the disaster had not remained one. Well, she muttered, at least someone here knows how to do their job. Naomi ignored her entirely. Instead, she turned back to the young server, whose eyes were still wet with embarrassment. Accidents happen, Naomi said quietly. You are fine. Go drink some water. The girl nodded and hurried off, wiping tears from her face. Ethan had not realized he was holding his breath until it left him. Because Charlotte had seen panic and chosen cruelty. Naomi had seen panic and chosen mercy. Same situation. Same power imbalance. Entirely different hearts. Their eyes met across the room then. Naomi was still smoothing icing from her fingertips onto a cloth towel, strands of hair loosening near her temple, expression composed despite the crisis she had just prevented. Ethan stared at her, chest tightening with a realization he was not prepared for. It was not infatuation, not simple attraction. It was worse. He admired her. Deeply. Dangerously. And somewhere in that terrifying recognition, standing in a ballroom full of crystal and wealth and people he had known his entire life, Ethan Whitmore began to understand that the woman managing his wedding possessed more grace under pressure than anyone he planned to invite to it. The ballroom emptied slowly after sunset, leaving behind the hush that only followed expensive events once the laughter and performance drained out of them. Staff rolled carts across polished marble. Candles burned lower in their glass cylinders, their wax pooling gold against the tablecloths. Outside, the city rain had started again, tapping softly against the high windows in uneven rhythm. Naomi stood alone near the sweetheart table with her heels kicked off beneath a linen-covered chair, barefoot on the cool floor as she rechecked the final place settings one last time. Her shoulders ached. Her feet throbbed. There were still 3 vendor confirmations to send before midnight and a floral refrigeration issue to solve before sunrise. She bent to straighten a fork half an inch out of line when a voice behind her said, "Do you ever stop working?" She did not startle this time. "Do you ever stop appearing where you are not scheduled to be?" Ethan smiled faintly as he stepped into the candlelight. His jacket was gone now, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tie missing entirely. Without the armor of ceremony, he looked younger. Less like an heir. more like a man who had wandered into his own life by mistake. Naomi returned her attention to the table. If Charlotte sent you to ask for another change to the linens, tell her no. She did not send me. Then what are you doing here? Ethan glanced around the empty ballroom. Honestly, he hesitated, avoiding everyone. That made Naomi look at him. Your own rehearsal dinner? Especially my own rehearsal dinner. A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Ethan noticed. Again, and again it struck him harder than it should have. He moved toward the bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of sparkling water left behind by catering. Peace offering? He asked, holding one out. Naomi stared at it for a beat, then accepted. Their fingers brushed briefly. The contact was accidental. It still lingered. They stood beside the candlelit table in silence for a moment, the ballroom warm with amber light and rain-muted shadows. Then Ethan asked, how long have you been doing this? Naomi took a sip before answering. 10 years. Your company? Started with 1 folding table, a rented laptop, and enough anxiety to power Lower Manhattan. Ethan laughed softly. You built all this yourself? She gestured around the ballroom. Not this specifically, but yes, my business. He studied her profile in the candlelight. Why weddings? Naomi's expression shifted, not sad exactly, but distant. Because when I was 12, my mother cleaned event halls overnight. She used to bring me with her if she could not afford a sitter. I would sit under tables while she swept confetti and folded chair covers at 2 in the morning. Ethan said nothing, sensing there was more. Naomi's voice softened. One night she told me, look around, baby. Some people get invited to beautiful rooms. Some people build them. Learn the difference. Ethan swallowed. Your mother sounds remarkable. She was. The past tense landed between them quietly. Naomi stared into her glass. She died before I opened my company. Ethan's chest tightened. I am. Sorry. She nodded once. So I built it anyway. The rain tapped harder against the windows. Somewhere in the hallway beyond the ballroom, a cartwheel squeaked against tile. Ethan looked at her then, not at her face, not at the elegance of her posture or the softness of candlelight on her skin, but at the life inside her words. The grit, the history, the quiet strength forged in rooms where no one had handed her anything. And suddenly the women he had dated all his life, women bred for galas and fundraisers and polished conversation, felt strangely unfinished by comparison. You know, he said softly, most people in my world would not survive a week building what you built. Naomi glanced sideways at him. Most people in your world would not survive 1 subway delay. He laughed, genuine this time, the sound warmer than before. For a moment, they simply stood there smiling at each other in the golden quiet, something unspoken passing gently between them. Then Charlotte's voice shattered it from the doorway. There you are. Both turned. She stood framed beneath the archway in a silk-wrapped coat, expression sharp enough to cut glass. Her eyes dropped immediately to the 2 glasses in their hands, to how close they were standing, to the look on Ethan's face before he had time to hide it. And in that instant, Naomi saw something change behind Charlotte's polished smile. Suspicion, possessiveness, calculation. Ethan, Charlotte said sweetly, though nothing in her tone was sweet at all. My parents are asking where you disappeared to. Ethan stepped back instinctively. The movement was small. It still landed like ice water. Naomi's smile vanished. She set her untouched glass down on the table. Good night, Mr. Whitmore, she said, voice once again perfectly professional. Then she slipped on her heels, gathered her binder, and walked past Charlotte without another glance. Ethan turned to watch her go, every instinct in him pulling toward the woman leaving the room instead of the one waiting at the door. And for the first time in his life, that instinct terrified him. Wedding morning arrived wrapped in silver clouds and the low hum of controlled chaos. By 7 o'clock the Grand Hartford ballroom had transformed into a machine of steaming garment bags, florist buckets, camera flashes, and assistants hurrying across marble floors in sensible shoes, while Naomi directed the storm from the center of it all. Her headset buzzed constantly. The ice sculpture was late. One bridesmaid had left her shoes at the hotel. The string quartet needed access to a side outlet no one had approved. Naomi handled each issue with clipped efficiency, her black tailored suit immaculate despite the pace, clipboard tucked beneath one arm as she moved through the venue like she had memorized every inch of it. But beneath the professionalism, something felt off. Not in logistics. In atmosphere. Charlotte was sharper than usual, her smile stretched too tight, her tone too sweet whenever Ethan entered the room. And Ethan himself looked like a man walking toward a future he could no longer convince himself he wanted. Naomi saw it when the photographer posed him in the bridal suite lounge for staged preparation shots. Saw it in the way his smile never reached his eyes. Saw it when he adjusted his cufflinks for the third time in 10 minutes, shoulders rigid beneath custom navy wool. She told herself not to notice. Told herself it was not her place to notice. Then the maid of honor rushed toward her pale-faced. Naomi, we have a problem. How bad? Bridal gown zipper. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Of course it is. 2 minutes later, she was in the bridal suite kneeling behind Charlotte, carefully working the delicate zipper track, while 3 bridesmaids hovered in panic and hairspray thickened the air. If this dress tears, Charlotte muttered into the mirror, I am billing your company personally. Naomi did not react. It is a snag in the lining, not the zipper, she said calmly. Hold still. Her fingers worked with patient precision until the fabric loosened and the zipper slid smoothly into place. Relief flooded the room. One bridesmaid clapped softly. Charlotte stood, examined herself in the mirror, then turned. For one fleeting second Naomi thought perhaps, gratitude might appear. It did not. Charlotte's gaze dropped to Naomi's name badge clipped near her lapel. Then she smiled. You know, she said loudly enough for every woman in the room to hear. It is honestly impressive how comfortable some people become in spaces they were never meant to be in. The room froze. Naomi rose slowly to her feet. One bridesmaid looked horrified. Another stared at the floor. Charlotte stepped closer, voice sugar-sweet. I mean, can you imagine? Going from cleaning up after events to pretending you belong at them. Naomi's face remained still, but her spine straightened another inch. My company was hired because I am the best at what I do, she said evenly. Charlotte laughed. Please. You were hired because my mother thought it would make us look progressive. A silence like broken glass spread through the suite. Then a new voice cut through it. Enough. Every head turned. Ethan stood in the doorway. No one had heard him enter. He looked directly at Charlotte, not angry exactly, but something colder, disappointed in a way that seemed to strip all warmth from the room. That is enough, he repeated. Charlotte blinked. Excuse me. Ethan stepped fully inside. You do not get to speak to people that way. The room seemed to stop breathing. Charlotte let out a disbelieving laugh. You are defending the wedding planner? I am correcting someone who is behaving cruelly. The words landed with surgical calm. Naomi stood motionless, stunned into silence. Charlotte's face flushed instantly. In front of everyone? Are you serious right now? Ethan's jaw tightened. I should have said it the first time you did it. The sentence hit Naomi like a held breath finally released. Charlotte stared at him, wounded pride flashing into fury. Then maybe if you admire her so much, you should let her walk down the aisle instead. The room went dead quiet. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to, because for one dangerous, unbearable second, his eyes moved to Naomi. And everyone in that room saw it. Saw the hesitation. Saw the truth flicker across his face before he buried it. Charlotte saw it most of all. Her expression changed instantly, rage sharpened by realization. Naomi stepped back, pulse hammering. I should go check the ceremony setup, she said quietly, and left before anyone could stop her. She walked fast down the corridor, heels striking tile in sharp, frantic rhythm, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. Behind her, muffled voices erupted inside the bridal suite. But Naomi barely heard them, because she had spent days pretending this tension was one-sided, harmless, survivable. Now there was no pretending left. The groom had defended her in front of his bride. And for the first time, the entire wedding felt like something built on glass. Naomi spent the next 20 minutes pretending her hands were steady. She adjusted ceremony programs no one had touched, realigned aisle petals already straight, and instructed the string quartet to delay their entrance by exactly 40 seconds simply because giving orders felt easier than acknowledging the storm inside her chest. Guests began filling the garden terrace in waves of silk, black tuxedos, and low, expensive laughter. The white floral arch shimmered beneath soft afternoon light. Crystal chairs lined the aisle in perfect rows. Everything looked flawless. Everything looked like a wedding. Naomi stood at the edge of the terrace with her clipboard pressed against her ribs when Ethan found her. Naomi. She turned sharply. You should not be here. His tie was slightly crooked now, one cuff unfastened. His usual polish cracked around the edges. We need to talk. No, we do not. She started to move past him. He stepped in front of her. Not aggressively, just enough to stop her. Please. The word was so unguarded it made her pause. Guests murmured in the distance. Somewhere behind them a violin began tuning. Naomi lowered her voice. You are getting married in less than 15 minutes. That is the problem. She stared at him. Do not do this. I cannot stop thinking about you. The words came out rough, stripped of strategy, as if he had run out of ways to contain them. Naomi's breath caught hard enough to hurt. Ethan, no, let me finish. His voice dropped lower. I have spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, saying the right thing, choosing the right schools, the right career, the right relationship. Every part of my life has looked correct from the outside. His eyes locked onto hers. And then you walked into it. Naomi shook her head once, already stepping backward. Do not say things you cannot take back. Why, he asked. Because they are true. Because this is not real. Her voice sharpened, fear bleeding into it. This is proximity and pressure and a man panicking before his wedding. That is not what this is. Then what is it? She snapped. Tell me what exactly you think happens after today. You leave her at the altar and ride off into the sunset with the wedding planner? Do you know what that makes me in your world? Ethan opened his mouth. Naomi did not let him speak. A scandal. A stereotype. A punchline at every country club your family belongs to. The truth of it landed between them heavy and brutal. You think I do not know that? Ethan asked quietly. Then act like it. Her eyes glistened, but her voice held. Whatever this feeling is, admiration, attraction, confusion, it is not enough to survive what comes after a decision like that. Ethan stared at her, chest rising hard. You really think I would care what they say? I think, Naomi whispered. You have never had to pay the price for loving the wrong person in the eyes of powerful people. The word silenced him. Because she was right. Because for Ethan, defiance had always been theoretical. For Naomi, consequences were lived experience. A wedding coordinator rushed around the corner, pale and breathless. Mr. Whitmore, everyone is seated. We need you at the aisle now. Ethan did not move. His eyes stayed on Naomi. Tell me not to do this, he said softly. Her face cracked for the first time. Just slightly. Enough for him to see the feeling she had fought so hard to bury. Go marry her, Naomi whispered. Go do what your world expects. His jaw tightened. That is not what I asked. Naomi forced her spine straight. Forced the ache back down where it belonged. It is the only answer I can give you. The coordinator shifted nervously. The music cue began in the distance. Guests turned in their seats. Ethan looked at Naomi one last time, searching her face for something, permission, perhaps, or hope. But all she gave him was the same composed professionalism she had worn from the beginning. A mask built from discipline and survival. Slowly he stepped back, then another step. Then he turned and walked toward the aisle he no longer wanted to stand in. Naomi watched him go until he disappeared beyond the garden doors. Only then did she let herself breathe. Only then did she press trembling fingers against her lips and realize the worst part was not that he had confessed. It was that every word she had said to push him away had broken her own heart too. The ceremony began beneath a sky the color of polished steel, the kind of pale gray that made white roses glow brighter, and every black tuxedo looked sharper against the garden terrace. Guests rose as the quartet played the opening notes of Pachelbel's canon, chairs whispering softly against the stone. Naomi stood near the back with her headset in one ear and a radio pressed to her palm, every inch of her composed from the outside. Inside, she felt hollow. Ethan took his place at the altar beside the officiant, shoulders squared, jaw set so tightly the muscle ticked near his temple. His father sat in the front row with the rigid posture of a man who believed appearances were sacred. Charlotte's mother dabbed at her eyes with embroidered lace. Everything looked exactly as it was supposed to. Then the doors opened. Charlotte appeared at the far end of the aisle in a fitted white gown that caught the afternoon light like poured silk, bouquet cradled in perfect manicured hands, smile arranged with practiced precision. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. Cameras lifted. The quartet swelled. She began walking toward him. Ethan looked up, and the world seemed to narrow into silence. Because all at once he could not breathe. Charlotte moved toward him one measured step at a time, radiant and elegant, and entirely wrong. The closer she came, the louder Naomi's words echoed in his mind. Go do what your world expects. He looked past Charlotte, past the flowers, the guests, the polished ritual, and saw Naomi standing near the terrace doors in black tailored silk, clipboard against her side, watching with a face so professionally neutral no one else would have noticed the pain in her eyes. Something inside him broke. Charlotte reached the altar. The officiant smiled. Dearly beloved, wait. The word cut through the ceremony like shattered glass. Gasps erupted instantly. The officiant froze. Charlotte turned sharply. What are you doing? Ethan's chest rose hard beneath his tuxedo. He stared at her, then at the guests, then finally at the ring in his trembling hand. I cannot do this. The terrace went dead silent. Charlotte laughed once, small, disbelieving, almost amused. Excuse me. Ethan's voice steadied as he spoke, though it looked like every word cost him something. I cannot stand here and promise you forever when I know it would be a lie. A collective inhale swept through the crowd. Charlotte's face drained white beneath her makeup. You are joking. I am sorry, he said, and for the first time in his life the apology sounded like truth instead of polish. I should have realized this before today. You deserve honesty, even if it comes too late. Honesty. Her voice cracked upward. You humiliate me in front of 200 people and call that honesty? Ethan said nothing, because there was nothing to defend. Charlotte's eyes flashed with sudden understanding, sharp and poisonous. She turned slowly, following his line of sight, straight to Naomi. The entire crowd followed with her. The silence that hit Naomi then was suffocating. Charlotte pointed. Her, she spat, disbelief twisting into fury. This is because of her. Naomi's stomach dropped. Charlotte, Ethan began. You are throwing away your future for the help. The words rang across the terrace. Guests shifted in stunned discomfort. Naomi stood frozen, every eye in the garden now burning into her skin. Ethan stepped forward, voice like steel. Do not speak about her that way. The defense only made it worse. Charlotte laughed, a broken, bitter sound. My God, you really are in love with her. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. His silence was answer enough. Charlotte stared at him for one heartbeat longer, then ripped the veil from her hair and dropped her bouquet at his feet. White roses scattered across the stone like surrender flags. Then she turned and stormed back down the aisle through a sea of horrified guests and whispering family members. The ceremony dissolved instantly into chaos. People stood. Voices erupted. The officiant stepped back in stunned silence. Ethan's father was already marching toward the altar, face thunderous. But Ethan barely noticed any of it. Because across the wreckage of the wedding, he met Naomi's eyes. She looked stricken, breathless, terrified, and beneath all of it, something else. Something she had tried desperately not to feel. The entire beautiful lie had just shattered in front of everyone. And now there was no going back for either of them. Chaos spread through the terrace in elegant clothes and raised voices. Guests whispered behind manicured hands. Groomsmen argued with ushers. Charlotte's mother was sobbing into the shoulder of a bridesmaid, while Ethan's father strode toward the altar with the rigid fury of a man who had spent his entire life confusing control for dignity. Naomi did not wait to see what happened next. The second the crowd surged into panic, she turned and disappeared through the service entrance behind the terrace, heels clicking fast against stone before breaking into a near run once she hit the empty hallway beyond. Her pulse hammered so violently she could hear it in her ears. She reached the loading dock behind the ballroom and braced both hands against a stack of catering crates, dragging in cold air that smelled like rain and wet concrete. This cannot be happening, she thought. This cannot be happening. Behind her, the service door burst open. Naomi. She closed her eyes. Do not. Ethan stepped into the alley behind the venue, chest rising hard, tuxedo jacket half unbuttoned, hair disheveled by the wind and disaster of what he had just done. Please do not walk away from me. Naomi turned so fast her clipboard nearly slipped from her hands. Walk away from you, she snapped. You just detonated a wedding in front of 200 people and put my name in the center of it. I did not mean for her to say that, but she did. Her voice cracked for the first time. And now every person in that room thinks I seduced a client into leaving his fiancée at the altar. Rain began misting down from the darkening sky, dotting her blazer, catching in her lashes. Ethan stepped closer. That is not what happened. It does not matter what happened, she shot back. It matters what people will believe. The words struck him still. Naomi laughed once, bitter and breathless. Do you understand what this does to me? To my business? To my reputation? Then I will fix it. With what? She asked sharply. A statement? A check? Another apology from a rich man who does not understand that women like me do not survive scandals the way men like you do. Ethan flinched like she had slapped him. But she kept going, years of restraint cracking open all at once. You get called impulsive, romantic, brave. I get called manipulative, opportunistic, a homewrecker. That is how this story gets told for someone who looks like me. Rain slid down her cheeks now, mingling with tears she refused to wipe away. Ethan stared at her, stunned silent not by anger, but by the sheer truth of what she was saying. Because again, she was forcing him to see the consequences he had been privileged enough never to consider. I did not do it for you, he said quietly. Naomi froze. He stepped closer into the rain. Not entirely. His voice shook now with the rawness of it. I did it because standing at that altar made me realize I would rather destroy my life telling the truth than spend another day living a lie. Naomi's breath caught. Ethan swallowed hard. Meeting you only made me honest enough to admit what was already broken. The rain fell harder around them, soft and steady against pavement and metal railing. Naomi stared at him, chest heaving, wanting desperately not to believe him because believing him would make everything harder. You do not know what comes next, she whispered. No, he said. But I know pretending I do would be less frightening than losing the one person who has made me feel more like myself in 1 week than I have in 34 years. Her eyes shut briefly. The ache of those words nearly undid her. Then headlights flashed across the alley. A black town car pulled hard into the loading area. Ethan's father stepped out before the driver could open his door, face carved from pure rage. Get in the car. Now. Ethan straightened but did not move. His father's eyes shifted to Naomi, and the contempt there was immediate. Clinical. Cold. So this is the distraction, he said. Naomi's shoulders stiffened. Ethan's voice dropped to ice. Do not. But his father ignored him. You throw away your future for this? For a scandal waiting to happen? The rain seemed to stop in Naomi's ears. Every old wound in her body recognized that tone instantly. The quiet, polished way powerful people made hatred sound respectable. Ethan stepped between them without hesitation. You will not speak to her that way. His father stared at him in disbelief. You have lost your mind. Ethan did not blink. No, he said. For the first time in my life, I think I finally found it. And standing there in the rain, between the man who raised him and the woman who changed him, Ethan Whitmore made his choice so clearly that even Naomi, terrified, shaken, and standing in the wreckage of everything, could no longer pretend not to see it. For a long moment no one moved. Rain drummed against the Blacktown car. Water slid from the sharp edge of the loading dock roof in silver streams. Ethan stood between Naomi and his father with his soaked tuxedo clinging to his shoulders, breathing hard, as if the decision he had just made was still reverberating through his bones. His father's face darkened, with something colder than anger. Disbelief. You are standing in the rain defending a stranger over your own family, he said. Ethan did not look away. She is not the problem here. No, his father replied, voice low and lethal. You humiliate your fiancé, disgrace your family, jeopardize your board seat, and destroy years of planning for what? A fantasy. Naomi's stomach tightened. She stepped back instinctively, wanting no part in this war between men born into a world she had never been invited into. But Ethan remained planted. This has nothing to do with fantasy. His father gave a humorless laugh. Then perhaps you truly are a fool. He glanced past Ethan toward Naomi, every syllable sharpened by contempt. Do not confuse opportunism for affection, son. Women like her know exactly what proximity to wealth can buy. Naomi's breath caught. The insult hit like ice water, familiar, polished, cruel in the way only old money could make cruelty sound civilized. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Whatever restraint he had left disappeared. Leave. His father blinked. What? Leave. Ethan repeated, voice deadly calm. Before you say something neither of us can forget. The older man stared at him, stunned. You would threaten me for her? Ethan stepped closer. No. I am warning you because despite everything, you are still my father. Do not make me choose this moment to stop acting like your son. The words landed like a gunshot in the rain. His father's jaw flexed. For one terrible second Naomi thought he might continue. Instead he gave a small, disbelieving shake of his head. You are throwing your life away. Ethan answered without hesitation. Then maybe it was never my life to begin with. Silence. Then his father turned sharply, climbed back into the town car, and slammed the door hard enough to shake the frame. The car pulled away in a spray of rainwater, leaving only the sound of tires hissing against wet pavement and two people standing breathless in the aftermath. Naomi stared at Ethan. Do you understand what you just did? Ethan looked at the empty driveway where the car had vanished. Probably ruined Thanksgiving for the next decade. She almost laughed despite herself, but the sound died before it fully formed. No, she whispered. You may have ruined everything. He turned to her then, rain dripping from his lashes. Maybe everything needed ruining. The honesty of it stole the air from her lungs. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, leaving just enough distance for her to walk away if she chose. I know this is a mess, he said softly. I know I have turned your life upside down in ways I cannot fully understand yet. But Naomi, his voice faltered on her name, raw with feeling. Tell me there is nothing between us, and I will leave right now. I will spend the rest of my life cleaning up what I broke and never bother you again. But if you feel even half of what I feel, do not lie to protect me from the consequences of my own choices. Rain slid down the line of Naomi's jaw. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear anything else. Every practical instinct in her screamed to walk away, to protect her business, her reputation, her peace, to leave before this impossible, dangerous thing became real. But Ethan stood before her soaked through and stripped of every shield wealth had ever given him, asking not for fantasy, not for rescue, just for truth. Naomi swallowed hard. You do not get to do all this and ask me for honesty like it is simple. I know. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. You make me forget to be careful. Ethan's breath caught. Naomi looked up at him fully then, tears mixing with rain. And that terrifies me. Something broke open in his face. Relief, wonder, grief, all at once. He stepped closer still, close enough that the heat of him cut through the cold rain between them. Neither moved for a heartbeat. Then another. Then the service door behind them swung open. One of Naomi's assistants burst out, panicked. Naomi, the press is here. They are already asking questions. Reality crashed back instantly. Naomi stepped away first, chest tightening. Ethan looked toward the front of the venue where camera flashes already flickered through the rain. The scandal had arrived. The world had caught up. And whatever existed between them now would no longer remain private, protected, or theoretical. It had become something far more dangerous. Something public. Something real. By nightfall, Naomi's phone had become unusable. Calls from unknown numbers. Messages from clients asking if the rumors were true. 3 wedding blogs had already posted grainy photos of Ethan, leaving the altar beneath headlines sharp enough to wound, and every version of the story painted Naomi exactly the way she feared they would. The planner who got too close, the outsider who crossed a line, the ambitious woman who reached above her place. She sat alone in her apartment with the city glowing dim beyond rain-streaked windows, shoes abandoned by the door, mascara still faintly smudged beneath exhausted eyes, and stared at the article on her screen until the words blurred. You knew this would happen, she whispered to herself, though hearing it did not make it hurt less. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan. She let it ring. It buzzed again. And again. Finally she answered. You need to stop calling me. Silence on the line for one breath. Then his voice, low and careful. Open your door. Naomi froze. She crossed the apartment in 3 quick steps and looked through the peephole. Ethan stood outside in dark jeans and a rain-soaked overcoat. No bodyguards, no driver, no polished billionaire armor. Just a man who looked like he had not slept. She opened the door halfway. Are you out of your mind? Possibly. The press is outside your building. I know. Then leave. Not until you let me explain. Naomi stared at him, anger and longing colliding so hard inside her chest it made her dizzy. Finally she stepped aside. Ethan entered, rainwater darkening the hardwood near the threshold. He looked around her apartment briefly, small but warm, lined with bookshelves, framed family photos, a stack of floral design magazines on the coffee table. Real. Lived in. Nothing like the sterile perfection of his penthouse. "You should not be here," she said again, arms folded tight. "Neither should half the people commenting online, but that has not stopped them." Naomi did not smile. Ethan stepped closer. "I saw the articles." "Of course you did. Then you know I am here because I will not let you face this alone." Her laugh came sharp and brittle. "You think standing in my living room changes what happened?" "No," he said, "but maybe it proves I am not running from it." Naomi looked away, jaw tight. "My assistant quit this afternoon." Ethan's face changed instantly. "What?" She said she did not sign up to work for someone in the middle of a scandal. 2 clients postponed meetings. 1 canceled outright. Her voice shook despite every effort to steady it. "This is not romantic, Ethan. This is my life coming apart in real time." He absorbed every word without defending himself. Then he nodded once. "Tell me what to do." Naomi frowned. "What?" "Tell me how to help without making it worse. Tell me what accountability looks like to you. Tell me what support actually means instead of what I assume it means." "I am listening." The sincerity of it knocked the anger sideways. Naomi stared at him, searching for performance. There was none. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices, asking how to carry part of the weight. "You cannot fix this with money," she said quietly. "I know. You cannot issue one polished statement and make people respect me again. I know." Her voice softened despite herself. "Then why are you here?" Ethan held her gaze. "Because everyone in your life is about to ask whether I was worth the damage." His eyes glistened slightly, though his voice stayed steady. "And I need you to know that if this costs you something, then it has to cost me too. Publicly. Fully. No hiding behind you while you take the hit." Naomi's breath caught. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and placed his phone on the counter between them. On the screen was a drafted statement addressed to every major outlet already requesting comment. She picked it up and read silently. It did not blame confusion. It did not suggest mutual misconduct. It did not imply temptation or scandal. It said plainly that he alone had ended the wedding because he realized he could not marry someone whose values he no longer shared, and that Naomi Carter had conducted herself with professionalism, integrity, and grace throughout the entire event. It ended with one final sentence. "Any attempt to diminish her reputation to protect mine is dishonest and will be corrected by me personally." Naomi read it twice before looking up. "You would release this? Tonight. Your family will lose their minds. They already have." Her lips parted. Then slowly, despite the chaos and fear and impossible uncertainty still hanging between them, something in her posture softened. Because for the first time in her life, a powerful man was not merely saying he admired her strength. He was using his own power to protect it. And standing there in the warm light of her small apartment, while rain tapped softly against the windows, Naomi began to understand that what Ethan felt for her was not reckless infatuation. It was choice. Repeated. Costly. Deliberate. The statement went live at 9:14 p.m. By midnight, every major outlet covering the scandal had updated their headlines. The narrative shifted almost instantly. No longer secret affair. No longer scheming planner. Now it was the billionaire groom who publicly admitted he had ended his wedding because he could not ignore moral differences with his bride, and who specifically defended Naomi Carter's professionalism by name. The internet, hungry as ever for blood, redirected its appetite toward the fallen socialite and the shattered wedding instead. It did not erase the damage, but it changed the shape of it. Over the next week, something stranger happened. Messages began arriving in Naomi's inbox from women she had never met. Some were former clients. Some were strangers. Black women. Working women. Women who had spent years swallowing disrespect in elegant rooms because walking away cost more than enduring it. They wrote things like, "Thank you for not shrinking. Thank you for standing there with dignity. Thank you for reminding some of us what it looks like not to break." Naomi read every message alone at her kitchen counter, tears stinging unexpectedly more than once. Her assistant came back 2 days later. The canceled client rebooked. Then another inquiry arrived. Then 3 more. Apparently, there was no better advertisement for composure under pressure than surviving public humiliation with grace while a billionaire imploded at your feet. Still, Naomi had not seen Ethan since the night in her apartment. Not because he vanished. Because he gave her space. No surprise appearances. No pressure. No grand gestures. Only one text every morning at 8 sharp. "Good morning. I hope today is kind to you." and one every night. Good night. I am still here. By the 8th day, she was smiling every time her phone lit up. On the 10th day, she finally texted back, "Meet me tomorrow. Bryant Park. Noon." He arrived 15 minutes early. Of course he did. Naomi spotted him near the fountain in a charcoal coat with his hands in his pockets, pacing once before forcing himself still when he saw her approaching. The entire city seemed bright and cold around them, winter sunlight glinting off glass towers, taxis hissing down wet streets. Ethan looked at her like a man seeing water after drought. "Hi," he said softly. Naomi stopped in front of him, heart pounding far harder than it should for one small word. "Hi." Neither moved for a second. Then Ethan let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. "I was starting to think you hated me. I considered it." He smiled. "Fair." Naomi studied him carefully. "My business survived. Good. My mother used to say character is what remains after embarrassment burns off." Ethan's expression gentled. "She sounds wiser than most board members I know." Naomi looked down briefly, then back up. "You stood by what you said. I told you I would. Most men in your position would have protected themselves first." Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "Then most men are not worth your time." The simplicity of it stole her breath. Around them the fountain sprayed silver in the cold sunlight. Children laughed somewhere near the carousel. The city kept moving, indifferent to the private revolution taking place in the center of it. Naomi stepped closer. "You understand this does not become easy now. I know. People will stare. Let them. Your family may never approve. That is their burden." Her voice dropped. "And if this gets harder than either of us expects." Ethan looked at her with a steadiness that made the whole world seem quieter. "Then we deal with hard things honestly. Together. Or not at all." Naomi stared at him for one long breath, then another. Every instinct she had ever built to survive told her to stay cautious, to protect herself, to keep one foot outside the fire. But this man had walked away from wealth, expectation, image, and comfort not because she asked him to, because he chose truth before he knew if it would earn him anything. Slowly, Naomi smiled. Small at first, then real. "All right," she whispered. Ethan's breath caught. "All right." She nodded once. "You may take me to dinner, Mr. Whitmore." His entire face changed. Relief, joy, disbelief crashing together so openly it made her laugh. "Dinner," he repeated, almost reverent. "Yes," she said. "Dinner. One date. No dramatic speeches. No wedding disasters. No public scandals if possible." Ethan smiled wider than she had ever seen. "I will do my best." And as they began walking side by side beneath bare winter trees and pale Manhattan sunlight, neither touching yet, but closer than before, Naomi felt something unfamiliar bloom quietly beneath the fear. Not fantasy, not rescue, something steadier, something earned. Hope. 3 months later, Naomi stood in the center of another ballroom beneath another field of crystal light, fastening the final ribbon around a bridal bouquet while assistants hurried around her with practiced speed. The room smelled of garden roses and fresh linen. String lights glowed warm against ivory drapery. Somewhere near the entrance, a nervous bride was asking if the champagne tower looked too tall. Naomi smiled to herself. Some things never changed, but other things had changed entirely. Her business had grown faster in 3 months than it had in the previous year. Interviews had come. Features in bridal magazines had followed. Not because of scandal anymore, but because clients saw what pressure revealed: grace, discipline, excellence. She had become known not as the woman from the broken wedding, but as the planner who handled disaster better than anyone in the city. And every morning without fail, Ethan still texted her before sunrise if he knew she had an early event. Every night he still called. Even if only for 5 minutes between flights and meetings and family fallout, he was still navigating with bruised but unbroken resolve. It had not been easy. His father had removed him from 2 family foundations. Several board members treated him like a cautionary tale in tailored suits. Invitations disappeared. Friendships shifted. People whispered. But every time the pressure mounted, every time Naomi gave him an out and told him he did not have to keep choosing this if it cost too much, he gave her the same answer. "I am not losing the best thing that ever happened to me because weaker people need my obedience." That night, as the final guests took their seats and the ceremony began, Naomi slipped out to the side corridor to breathe for one quiet moment before reception chaos returned. She leaned against the cool wall beneath a brass sconce and closed her eyes. Then she heard familiar footsteps. I had a feeling I would find you hiding near the emergency exits. She opened her eyes smiling before she even saw him. Ethan stood there in a dark wool coat with winter air still clinging to him, tie loosened, hands tucked in his pockets, looking at her the way he always did now, as if even after months he had not adjusted to the fact that she was real. I am not hiding, she said. I am supervising from a distance. Naturally. He stepped closer and kissed her forehead softly, reverently, the kind of affection that still startled her with its gentleness. How was the board meeting? She asked. Ethan exhaled. Unpleasant. Predictable. One man used the phrase, optics concerned 7 separate times. Naomi snorted. A new record? Personal best. She laughed, and Ethan looked at her for a second longer than necessary, his expression softening into something deeper. What? She asked. He shook his head slightly. Nothing. His voice dropped. Sometimes I still cannot believe I almost married the wrong person because everyone else told me she looked right on paper. Naomi's smile faded into something quieter, more tender. You did not choose me because I was easy. No, he said. I chose you because you were honest in a room full of people performing. The words settled into the warm silence between them. Naomi reached for his hand. Their fingers laced naturally now, like something learned through repetition and trust. Through choosing each other over and over until it no longer felt improbable. Just true. Down the hall, applause erupted as the bride kissed the groom beneath the ceremony arch. Naomi and Ethan turned toward the sound. She watched the doors for a moment, listening to the joy on the other side of them, then felt his thumb brush gently over her knuckles. You know, Ethan said softly, the strangest part of all this? What? He smiled. I thought I hired a wedding planner. Naomi raised an eyebrow, and his eyes held hers, warm and steady beneath the corridor light. Turns out she planned the rest of my life instead. Naomi laughed through the sudden sting in her eyes and leaned into him as applause echoed through the ballroom walls. Outside, snow had begun falling beyond the tall windows, slow, quiet, silver in the night. And standing there in the soft light with his hand in hers, and an entire changed future stretching ahead of them, Naomi understood something simple and beautiful at last. She had not forced the world to become kind. She had not changed every cruel heart. She had not erased every prejudice waiting in elegant rooms. But she had stood in her dignity when people expected her to shrink.